Let's make a Kirblog, make a Kirblog. Do you want fun or a good story in your favorite game? Video games. Welcome, hi, hello. Quick short solo one this weekend before I gear up for a lot of not short ones for a while, and you'll know why soon. This is a question that was submitted in a comment on the YouTubes by ProtoSonic. Hey, Kirb, just a quick question. What would you consider to be the perfect game in terms of story and or gameplay? So this is going to be a tricky one to answer because I don't think I have a direct, just this is my answer, this is the game, and now I'm going to talk about it, because there may not really be such a thing as a perfect game. But Kirb, you may be wondering, as I'm still doing this Kirblog anyway, despite that, you're full of shit. What are you talking about? I've done a lot of ruminating about this, especially in the last couple of years as I've been learning a lot more and studying a lot more about game design and game theory. And no, not the show. Not that I don't love it. Games are subjective for their pure enjoyment factor. And the enjoyment that people get from games is completely from person to person. And, I feel like for a lot of us who we grew up with certain games, there are, particular genres and therefore those genres corresponding enjoyment factors that go with them that, we're more interested in, that we're more prone to. But they're different for everybody. I mean, I think it's the reason why a lot of people who now get into games way later, whether they're younger or older, I think about why do people like mobile games so much? Because aren't mobile games supposed to be dumb and petty and easy or whatever? But mobile games, for instance, I think are so successful because they're incredible. Their enjoyment factor is incredibly simplistic. You look at Angry Birds, the feeling of just of reeling back the bird, throwing it at the thing, and scoring as many points as possible. That is the pure raw enjoyment factor of that game. It's quick, it's easy, it's simple, and it's immediately satisfying. Now that's for it being very simple. For other people, there are more, like tactics type games, strategy games that require a lot more intense thought, I guess, to properly play and more specifically to win at. When it comes to competitive gaming, that's a whole nother kind of animal that I'm not going to touch on here. But I was just thinking about this even in this past week. I was at Mike and Steve's house, and Steve was playing through One Piece Pirate Warriors. And, we were talking about, God, this is really just you're mashing the A button over and over and over. The actual levels are not really all that in depth, et cetera. We were both talking about this. And I was even analyzing, for us, it's just oh, whatever. Really, it's just the aesthetics, and we're just sort of, enjoying the One Piece characters that come out of it, and that's really it. But the gameplay itself is pretty whatever. But I'm okay, but the Dynasty Warriors type, genre, that has lasted for a very long time, and a lot of different forms now as well, with different kind of sub franchises and things, and clearly. It's because there are a fair amount of people that enjoy just the, again, that pure enjoyment factor of okay, I like the feeling of going around and kicking the shit out of entire droves, armies worth of enemies and foot soldiers and things, and to which that's extended to, beyond Dynasty Warriors to Sengoku Basara with all these One Piece games, even Zelda Hyrule Warriors, etc. I even think about, first-person shooters, which are arguably among, if not the most, in this age, popular types of games in the world. I have never enjoyed first-person shooters. Even as far back as I can remember, my earlier ones were stuff like Turok for the N64, and the South Park game, which I know was a bad game, and then I've probably told my story about how I had kind of a bad experience with GoldenEye. But even as I've tried in different places other first-person games like Metroid Prime, which I thought would be a lot more up my alley because it's more about exploring, I just don't enjoy the first-person view. I from maybe not a technical standpoint, but just I prefer having a third-person view if I'm playing a 3D game in particular. It's just way easier for me to manage having a character that exists that's fallible in that world, as opposed to seeing through their eyes. But for a lot of people, it's just more immersive that way to be playing. Even Overwatch is taking over the goddamn world right now. And as inventive as those characters are, when you're playing them, you're in first-person mode. Like, I bet you $1,000,000 I'd probably be a lot more interested in Overwatch. Well, you know what? No, okay, I'm stopping myself. I say that I'd be more interested in playing Overwatch if it were third person and not first person. But even then, I don't really play online games. Like, I've very rarely ever tried any of that sort of stuff, and I just don't really enjoy like that's for me personally. That's not where I get my enjoyment in playing games. Like for me, the biggest enjoyment that I get from games in general most of the time is just playing through a game and experiencing it by myself typically. Moving on to some of my favorites, like I can play through Donkey Kong Country, like the original one, in an hour, and I enjoy it every single time. And I don't consider myself a speedrunner or like a completionist. I've only ever completed Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3 each, 100%, I think, once each. Maybe I did that for Donkey Kong Country 2 a second time, but either way, like I can just like speed through the first one and just have a good time with it and enjoy. Same thing with like Banjo-Kazooie, which I can beat that game. I think my fastest time for that has been like 4 or 5 hours of like just like being through the whole thing. And like I can even in my later years, because like Donkey Kong Country 3 was kind of, Mac likes to joke about how that was the gateway for Rare to get a little bit too crazy with the collectathon shit for the rest of their games later. He didn't say shit though. I just said that he's a good boy and he doesn't curse, just like Raccoon. Anyway, but I can even like dissect through like. I remember, actually, I think I talked about this like ages and ages ago on like a Channel Awesome video with like Paul Dugan and a bunch of folks. It's like a MagFest or something. It's talking about how like in Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie even more so, to me, like it was more obvious to me in the second one, that like everything kind of comes down to it's like one of 3 different tasks you're performing, and that's it. It's just like, oh, like you're either going to this place over here getting this Jiggy, or you're collecting a bunch of items that will eventually get you a new Jiggy or whatever, like the Jinjos, etc. Like just only a few different things, and they're all just like dressed up in different kind of ways. And Banjo-Tooie complicates them more. Banjo-Tooie I think is here's an interesting one. Banjo-Tooie I think is a better game. It's like a more well-designed game in terms of like it's interesting. But I like Banjo-Kazooie more, and I'll play through Banjo-Kazooie a lot more because it's an easier, shorter experience. And I've only played through Ocarina of Time once. I played through a lot of it again on the 3DS remake, and I've only played like about half of Majora's Mask. Like I can look at Majora's Mask and say this is a better, more interesting, more well-designed, more refined game, but I like Ocarina of Time more, and probably in that case just because that was the attachment that I had. And a lot of people think about like talking about story now as well. A lot of people think of Zelda for stories, and I've never been like a massive Zelda fan, but like my kind of equivalent, when I think about story first, I think often of Kingdom Hearts will come to mind, even though while I, and me and Ash and Derek talked about this a lot, and like, Ben and Heather and I can talk about the Kingdom Hearts story and lore and everything for, hours on end or whatever, but the truth is, there's very little I've taken away from the experience of Kingdom Hearts story in terms of like, there's lots of moments and cool things in it that like I remember and have fond memories of, but it's not a story that was incredibly impactful to me in terms of like how strong it was or its morals or whatever. It's really interesting, and like the kind of crazy dramatic stuff and the lore type shit that happens with the characters. But I can look at this and say, okay, the stories aren't, except for, I would argue, except for Birth by Sleep, which is the one that I think has the most like depth to the character development and everything. And I talked extensively about that on the Kingdom Hearts Kirblog. And then even, as we were talking about, the gameplay for a lot of those games doesn't necessarily hold up all that great either, to be honest. There are probably better action games out there than that. I even think about, in terms of like a story that moves me from a video game, I'm kind of cheating here, but like I think of Last of Us. Admittedly, I've only watched Last of Us because I couldn't play it. I don't have a PlayStation. I haven't had a PlayStation since the 2. And even then I hear the gameplay for that is kind of so-so. I can't attest to that because I haven't, tried it for myself. But like, I remember I was watching Martin and Mariana at their place. They were playing through it for a while, and they were getting annoyed with it, but they were like, yeah, but the story is really worth it. In which case, then I think about that sort of thing where it's like, oh, is something like this better off as a movie? And then that's kind of up for debate or whatever, As far as answering the actual question goes, though, Mario RPG, as a lot of you guys know, is one of my favorites of all time, and it's close to perfect for me, but it's also very specific for me. And, you know, because, like, I obviously I grew up with it. Obviously, it was the first turn-based RPG that I played, a genre of which I have a fair amount of admiration for, although I say that as someone who also hasn't played any of, like, the classic Final Fantasy games or like, you know, like Dragon Quest or anything like that, so I kind of have to hand in my turn-based RPG fan card for that in and of itself, I would say. But in fact, actually, I'll even say, because I think that the Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi games objectively are improvements, like both in terms of gameplay and maybe even to an extent, maybe even the stories. Because, like, Mario RPG has a fun story. It's not a super deep, super in-depth, even really that emotional story, I would say, but it's really, really fun. It's got a lot of really fun moments, really fun, cool, interesting, different kind of characters for that series, for the Mario franchise in general. And I have a lot of emotional attachment to it. But even as I look back, you know, with that much, you know, I don't even know, like 20 years worth of attachment, I can still look at this and say, yeah, the story is not, you know, incredibly in depth. It's not incredibly moving. And even, like, I look at like the Paper Mario games in particular for their stories. You know, I think like 64 and then Thousand Year Door and then Super Paper Mario, I think, have really, really, like, moving stories. It's like further in succession with each one. Like Super Paper Mario, I was, like, blown away at how moving that game ended up being, actually. And then the Mario and Luigi games, I've only really played a bit through Superstar Saga and Dream Team, of which I've kind of gathered that most of the stories of those games are not all that interesting either. But I think in terms of gameplay, they're definitely, like, the evolution of what came from Mario RPG, certainly. But I still get the same level of satisfaction of going through the entire game of Mario RPG, you know, that many times. You know, I just recently played through the entire thing twice in the span of the week. And again, going back to that pure enjoyment factor, I will always get the same kick out of the dialogue and the character interactions when it comes to the story. I'll always get the same kick out of, you know, fighting the bosses and you know, the battle system and the satisfaction of, like, scoring the timed hits and everything. You know, like, that game I can play with my fucking eyes closed at this point, practically. You know, and like, even recently I've taken to trying to, you know, play a little bit differently. Like, I've been trying different team combinations and not always depending on my same combo of Mario, Gino, and Peach, which is what I always fell back on for a while, just to make it a little bit more interesting for myself. But even so, like, even if I'm going, like, the safe way, it's still fun and it feels the same. Going back to earlier as well, I was talking a little bit about how I don't typically enjoy playing games with people online very often. But as far as playing games with other people, you know, Smash Brothers is a game that I would also kind of put up there in terms of perfection, because no matter what, it is always fun to play that at pretty much any point. Even, like, I'll admit recently, like, because of the year of Smash 4 and all the DLC and updates and everything that came with it, like, I'm totally smashed out right now. Like, I haven't really, like, had much of an inkling to play it. Inkling. I've never played Splatoon, sorry. I should, though, because I'm sure I would enjoy that. I haven't played Smash in a while. Like when I go to Mike and Steve's house, like, we haven't played in a while, just because, like, we've kind of had our fill of it. But I'm sure, like, in a while, or, like, if I go to a party and it's set up or whatever, I'll totally play it, and I'll play it for like an hour or two. And it's always the same level of enjoyable. And that is also a fighting game, you know, a non-traditional fighting game that I'm okay enough that I can, like, play it. I'm not good. I'm not super good at it or whatever. But again, even when I'm sick of it, the same pure enjoyment factor of that one always comes back, and it's always enjoyable, especially when it's with friends. The single player side of things, sadly, that one's kind of died out for me. I think Brawl kind of hit the ultimate stride when it came to the single player experience of Smash Brothers. Because I did enjoy parts of the single player modes of Smash 4, but, like, Melee's adventure mode was always really cool, and then also the Subspace Emissary there's nothing else quite like that. And the story that came with that, for, you know, as minimalistic and with the cutscenes are and the lack of dialogue and everything, like the story of that game of Subspace Emissary was really, really enjoyable and a great celebration of all these different characters from all these different games that I loved so much. I'd say for me the most consistent, like, raw point of satisfaction probably comes from platformers. Like, platformers are always like an easy win for me, both 2D and 3D, probably because of just how many I played as a kid. And so just like, a lot of my free time from school is associated with playing those games, and I got to be pretty decent at a lot of the platformers that I play. Like, I'm good at all the Donkey Kong Country games, a lot of the early Mario games, some of the Mega Mans, not all of them, but like Mega Man 2 I can beat like easily, relatively, with my path that I've set out for me, And actually, while I'm thinking about that too, another more recently close to perfect game for me, I would definitely give a lot of credit to, is Shovel Knight. It has such a amazing balance in simplicity of gameplay and story. Gameplay to the point where, like, I have replayed through Shovel Knight, like the normal Shovel Knight mode, like, God, maybe like 10 times. I haven't touched it in a while. The last time I played through it was when the Plague of Shadows DLC came out, which that was, I'll get to that in a little bit, but like, Shovel Knight, in terms of like, it's the best new Mega Man game that we've gotten in years, as I like to describe it. It's amazingly, incredibly crafted by the guys at Yacht Club. They did such a good job on just the gameplay alone is masterfully done. Great combination of like all these really, really good elements of lots of different platforming games that I'm sure were all major inspirations to them over the years. And and like to the point where I could just, it's short enough, it's short and long enough, like at the same time, that I can just like play through it so many times, and then trying to do all like the achievements of like the super fast mode and the 100% completion mode, etc. And then like the story too, like the story is incredibly simple but so powerful, to where like the dynamic between Shovel Knight and other certain characters that I won't reveal the secrets of if you haven't played through Shovel Knight yourself. Please get it if you haven't, dear God. And then as a nice surprise, like Plague Knight, I wasn't sure what to expect with the Plague Knight DLC, but not only was the gameplay a leg up and a really fun challenge, and the controls were still super satisfying, that the story ended up being even more emotional and still simple but fun than the normal story, to which now, when they inevitably get to the Spectre Knight and King Knight DLC, which I think will be next year, that's going to be even more exciting to me, because I'm totally looking forward to what they come up with for that, and just it being based on the same engine, even playing through like pretty much the same levels and everything, except with some slight alterations. Like, I am so on board with that, like that in and of itself is enough for me. So Shovel Knight, if I were to look at it now, I think Shovel Knight for me, both objectively and personally, from playing it and just looking back compared to all the other games, I think that's the closest to it. That game is the closest to perfect I can think of offhand, for me to describe. And is it my favorite game of all time? No, it's not even. Like games like Mario RPG and Smash Brothers are, in terms of my emotional attachment to them, those are like in my top favorites. But Shovel Knight, if I think I were to have to look at something that makes a perfect game, I think that for me is the closest thing to it. And that's going to be it. I think that's pretty much all I have to say about it. So now I'm really curious on this one what you all have to say. So in the comments below, tell me, what do you consider to be the closest thing to a perfect game in terms of gameplay and story, and maybe even like all the like aesthetics, like music and graphics and stuff like that as well, because I think that Shovel Knight also falls into that category as in addition. But yeah, let me know give me some master theses in the comments below of what you think are the perfect games for you. I'm curious as to your thoughts, and explain to me why. And I won't say if you have future Kirblog suggestions. Leave a comment about that too, if you want, and maybe I'll get to it a bit later. But for a while, we're going to be having a lot of other ones planned. I've got one more for the rest of this month that I want to do. It's one about I was teasing it a little bit in the BoJack Horseman Kirblog about meeting your heroes. Might have a guest for that one, possibly, if they are willing and able to join in on that one. Yeah, and then after that, I've got some very interesting plans for October, which you might be able to guess if you can predict where I'm going with it based on last year, what I did. Look forward to that, and let me know your thoughts about this subject, and if you've got anything to say or anything to suggest for later on for Kirblog topics, leave a comment about that if you want. Hit me up on Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook, etc. But look forward to a lot of what I have in store over the next few months, and I hope you enjoy that. So till next time, play well. Bye. That's what Lego means. Play well. I should do a Lego Kirblog at some point. Bye.